If I was to cut it right here, this would be a fantastic intro to a talk titled Why You Should Use React Query.
Probably time to bring me in.
That path there that he took us through in 4 minutes was phenomenal.
You ever look at your code and you don't know WTF? So 4 people have given my
They're
talk.
bad at volume, not me. This isn't my fault, guys. It's them.
Kapoor, I'm not going to try her first name. Shruti, her talk, Lee's talk, David's talk. There was another one. Anyway,
I guarantee I'm not going to show you because of the damage it's going to do to everybody else. If I rewind this back to the intro, your ears are going to bleed
React Router, a little bit of
again.
background. We're going to talk a little about React Router.
This part's very quiet. The intro is very loud.
It was created in 2014. It's super old. Michael Jackson and I built it together. We quit our jobs to fund it at reacttraining.com. We founded Remix to take it to the next level. We released V6, and you all have taken it to the next level. This is blowing my mind, the trajectory that React Router is on. That's the NPM downloads. An 8-year-old project to see that kind of, like, there's no inflection point yet. So we're going to the moon. Our goal is to get all of you on Remix, though. So that's like, this is a good graph. So the question, when to fetch? What is the status quo today for our users?
How are the volume levels?
Spinageddon.
For y'all.
All over the place.
It's a little quiet.
I hate it. What is the status quo for us? This is where other people have covered things, so I can go quickly through this. Everyone's got your own use fetch hook, right? Does this look familiar? Any problems with this code? Oh, that's right. I can't have an async function in the effect. Okay, I'm going to put it over there. All right. What the heck? Why is this spinning forever? What do you mean it failed? I got to add error handling. Okay. Got my error handling. Yep. I clicked the link, the URL changed, but the UI just sat there. Oh, yeah. That little thing. That's how you change it. Okay, I clicked 2 links really fast. We've got some invoices up there. I clicked Santa Monica and then Stankonia. I don't know if I pronounced that right. I've only read it. I've never said it out loud in my life until now. I'm going to try Ocean Avenue. And these are my favorite albums from like when I was a kid, by the way. UI flickers. I see like the right thing and then I see the wrong thing because I click something quickly. Anyone know what's wrong there? Click 2 things twice, you see a flicker and then the wrong state.
Resolved out of order. The first request came in second.
Cancellation. Yes. So let's add an abort controller, and let's, like, if it's aborted, let's not set the state, and then let's return our cleanup. So this is what fetching looks like. And then you're like, oh no, I've got a component somewhere else that changes my invoice, like marks it as paid or something. But the component where I fetched the invoice couldn't be farther away in the UI than that. How do I get that thing to refetch so I can see it again?
If I was to cut it right here, this would be a fantastic intro to a talk titled Why You Should Use React Query. I know where this is going, and I think he has very good points knowing where I think this is going. Just wanted to point out that up to this point, this is all points in favor of things like React Query, as well as the things he's going to talk about. That is all.
Or see the updates. Probably time to bring in.
Anyways.
The professionals here. So Tanner Lindsley, thank you so much for React Query. He lives about 40 miles north of me by the sewers. So support him so that he can, I don't know, get somewhere. I'm just kidding. Well, that is all true, but I think he's doing fine.
I swear on my fucking life
So now we bring in
use
query. We've got our query key so we can expire this thing so that it'll refetch from some other place. We've got our error screen, we've got our spinners, and then in the end we actually have the happy path. Everything's fine, we can show this invoice. But this is still what the user's looking at, even with great libraries like React Query. I think this is a problem. Anyone else think it's a problem? Am I the only one trying to solve this problem? Okay. I've heard about a thing called suspense. So what's the problem?
I really like this so far. This is real, and solving this with React Query is solving this yourself. React Query gives you the ability to solve this yourself, but you still have to. This is your problem. even on faster internet, you're still going to see 5 different loading spinners pop in one at a time. This is correct, and React Query doesn't do a great job of solving it. He has framed this fucking perfectly so far. And I want to contrast this to like the talk that we watched before with the use effect is bad talk. This did a phenomenal job of like starting with, here is the like the simple thing we start with the like simple example with React Query, or not with React Query, with like DIYing your fetch. This is really hard to like find specific code parts from, but like this guy, when he had the use effect sample and then showed how it becomes more complex, showed how these problems get worse as your code matures, and like why this might look simple but isn't, led me to the solution I have right now, which is the React Query, to the point where I memed myself because of it. Showed why it's good and the problem it solves very well, like perfectly here. I wish he would give like actually it doesn't even matter, like an example of doing something that isn't a fetch to show that this is still useful for other things. He might even do that later, would be cool, but it does a fantastic job of showing what that pattern is and why this solves the problem that we had before in terms of ergonomics, but then shows the problem it doesn't solve.
In the end, we actually have the happy
immediately
path.
After.
Everything's fine. We can show this invoice.
That path there that he took us through in 4 minutes, the first minute of which was intro and stuff, was phenomenal. That was, props to you, Ryan. That was a fantastic setup. That was fully good faith, showed the strengths and weaknesses, and led us to the problem you're focused on without ignoring years of history before it. That was one of the best openers to a talk I've seen ever. Great work, Ryan, genuinely.
But this is still what the user's looking at, even with great libraries like React Query. I think this is a problem. Anyone else think it's a problem? Am I the only one trying to solve this problem? Okay. I've heard about a thing called suspense. So what's the problem? Component fetching. This component is doing 3 things. It's initiating the fetch, it's reading the result, and it's rendering the fallback. And you might think, yeah, that's a great hook. That is super cool. The problem is the parent fallback blocks the initialization of the child component's fetching. So even though you can see down there at the bottom, I've got a few more resources that I know I'm going to fetch, the UI blocked it because I put all my initializing, reading, and falling back into one component, and then it blocks everything else. So we got to somehow unblock this. So what's the solution? Well, we want to do it all in parallel. Not only is it faster, you can see those fake network graphs at the bottom, but you don't have all the jank either if you can do it in parallel. So
can y'all stop baiting me with these questions that I want to pause and go on rants about? Give you all a 1-sentence quick. To div mode, SWR is great for fetching if you want to like fetch while render. Generally, fetch while render is kind of bad, and SWR is solving a problem I don't like. So I React Query, and I mostly React Query for stuff on my own like device, like async device type stuff or tRPC. React Query is basically Apollo client. React Query gave me most of the things I liked about Apollo client, but it specifically isn't for REST. It's for anything async. You can query GraphQL with React Query. You can query your local devices with React Query. I actually have an example on my Twitter that went very viral where I was using React Query for devices. React Query is great for things that aren't fetching. If anything, I would argue React Query's weakest point is fetch. SWR wasn't first, React Query was, but generally agree that SWR like got the pattern adopted, React Query won. Yeah. Let's stop making apps. They all suck. Back to this.
well, how do we do it in parallel? You need to initiate fetches before you render. You can't be fetching in the middle of your components, otherwise you're going to render the spinners and you're going to block the next bit of the UI hierarchy. So, well, how do I do that? Decoupling is always the answer. If you're in a meeting and your like manager is in there and they're somewhat technical and like you want to impress them and a question comes up, just say, I think we need to find an opportunity to decouple some of these pieces. So we need to decouple initiating from reading from falling back. It's actually, that's three things. Couple is two. A few. We need to defew initiating from reading from falling back. Then you can initiate fetches before you render. Well, I heard that React 18 and server components fixes all of this. Anyone heard that? Anyone? Yeah? A few people? We try to talk about Remix and everyone tells us React 18 solves all this. I'm sorry, you heard wrong. RSC moves rendering and data fetching to the server. It doesn't know how to initiate. It doesn't care when you initiate. Streaming sends chunks of the document for the initial server render. It has no opinion on when you should initiate a fetch. Suspense defines where the UI can fall back when you're trying to read data that's already been initiated somewhere else. If you initiate underneath a suspense boundary, you're right back into component fetching. You're right back into the spinner request waterfall chain. So React is not a data. Oh, sorry.
I think I fully agree with this too. Yeah, fair points. This is. I like this framing so far.
Request
I'm excited to see where he goes with
so,
this.
React is not a data. Oh, sorry. Like David, got to add some authority to your slides. So Andrew Clark, not Dan, but next best thing. He was saying, I posted an article about remixing React Router. So we're taking all of the data stuff that we've done in Remix, forms and actions, if you've seen it. It's super cool, loading, our nested routes, all that kind of stuff. And we realized that this is all just a browser runtime that we could move over to React Router. So we're almost done with the work. I went on vacation, otherwise it would be done.
As someone who complains about React Router a lot, thank you for this. Seriously, like I didn't. How do I put this? They didn't have to keep improving React Router like this. Right now, you could argue React Router is actually a decent bit ahead of React or of Remix, which is a really interesting place to be. I have very high respect that they've continued pushing React Router forward rather than like competing with it and then slowly killing it because of business interest. I'm impressed. I'm happy that they're continuing to take their learnings back to React Router. Yes, Remix is built on top of React Router. Vercel is built on top of Next. There's still a bunch of things in Next and Vercel that other people don't have access to that are a bit weird. This absolutely is their funnel, but they're doing a good job taking care of that funnel. That's my comment here. The funnel is ahead of what it goes into in ways. It's weird that they would ever let React Router get ahead of Remix. And that's the thing I'm saying is unexpected and cool of them. And I wanted to give respect where it's due. That's all.
Already. And it was awesome. I got these flip-flops actually down in San Diego. Rainbows. They're the best. Last forever. He says here, suspense, and then he quotes the article, not designed to define where you initiate fetches, but rather where you access the results. And he said that's exactly right. Do you want to qualify this, or are we still exactly right? Well, all right. I guess you just have to trust me now at this point, but hopefully I can get him behind me again. So React is a rendering library. It's not a data library.
I think I like this slide. I really like that he specified fetch here because there's a lot of things that we have to be considerate of that aren't fetch that I do think React triggering makes sense. Like when the UI component for a video preview renders, activating your camera device asynchronously at that point makes sense. And that is a very separate problem. And this has done a great job of focusing on everything up to and before that point, but not that point and after. It's up until the client has received its response is what this is considerate of. And I feel like it's done a very good job of acknowledging the position. Like this talk has done a fantastic job of staying within the bounds that it's trying to, while citing a lot of prior work for context, which is really hard to do. To touch on so many different things and not feel like you're doing such in a bad faith way to just make a quick point or gut punch. This doesn't do that at all. This has been a very well contained path to where we are right now. And this slide is another great example of that in particular. I'm bought in. This is a great talk so far.
Right? It doesn't know when to initiate fetches. It doesn't care when you read results. Just read them wherever you need them. But it does help you fall back. It's a rendering library. It can help you fall back when you need to. And that's its job. That's the scope of React here. So what do you know so you can initiate a fetch before you render? Because like what is available to you to make this decision? That's it. That's it. Even with static generation and stuff like that, you're still got those pages or get static paths, which is essentially like a URL, right? So we know the URL. We might know the user, and then we could do some random stuff, or if you figure out how to do ESP in your code, that would be even better. But I don't think anyone's getting there. So what does React Router look like, and how is it helping you here? This is some of the stuff that we're bringing over from Remix that's almost done. So you can see a route can now define a function that's a loader. This is an async function, and you just return whatever you want. It also understands the web fetch API, request and response, so you can literally just return a response or a call to a fetch, and it'll work out. Now, the second thing down there is the hook, use loader data. This does not initiate a fetch. When you call this hook, it's not like, oh, do I have the data? No? Okay, let's start a fetch. It's not what it's doing. It just says, I know that something already initiated this fetch in the loader. I'm just going to give you the result when it's here. So we've been able to defew our initiating and reading. If your UI is nested, your route should be nested. Yehuda Katz, Ryan Florence. If your UI is nested, your route should be nested. Ryan Florence, Lee Robinson. That's yesterday. Are you taking notes?
That was good. Give them some shit. They deserve it. That was the first like dig, and it wasn't even like a dig. It was a good call out. I'm liking this a lot. I saw somebody ask in chat, like, is this I see comments that this is a funnel to Remix. Kind of. I think that this is a good faith explanation of the problem that Ryan Florence has dedicated his life to solving. If this goes to Remix at the end, that is fair. If it doesn't, and he leaves that exercise to the reader, that is even cooler. But this seems so far very directly focused on the problem and contextualizing that. I'm sure we're going to go into the solution now that we're talking about the loader API, but I do think this is going to be very React Router focused. I also saw somebody ask, or mention React Location. React Location is entirely client-side, as Maple said. That was the specific differentiator that Tanner chose. Fun enough, it actually was going to be SSR initially. I actually wrote some of the SSR binding with him. It was pretty fun. But he decided that the things he wanted to do were almost entirely client anyways, and he would rather have those loading patterns on client with all the power there rather than have great SSR, because he considered that a separate enough problem that he wanted to differentiate by focusing on client, which was the right call because React Router was more focused on building into Remix at the time. But I would argue Tanner fully succeeded with his goal with React Location because he kind of tricked Remix and the React Router, all these guys, into getting React Router to do what he needed it to do for client side. React Location was a phenomenal method to bully React Router into doing what he wanted. And I think I think that's exactly what he got what he wanted from there. I'm almost positive. We'll have Tanner on the show soon, and I'm sure that will be one of the core topics when we do. But from what I understand, he is very happy that the patterns he put there are being used by other stuff.
You should start taking notes, Lee. This is pull out your phone. What are nested routes?
A little petty.
Here's my UI. You can probably see them. Anytime you have a navigation component that affects the output, the rendering of another component, you've got a nested route. So at the root we have a JavaScript bundle for our root.js and our user JSON. At the sales, that's a component too. It's got its own data, its own code split bundle. We've got the invoices, and that's coupled to the URL up there, right? You can see the segments of the URL changing as we see all these little boxes. So this is what nested routing is we couple routes, or we couple components to segments of the URL. And now we can know before we render, we don't have to like throw in a suspense boundary or something to start initiating a fetch. We know before we even render anything what you need. This is what it looks like. So all those routes nested inside of each other. And you can see all those loaders are going to initiate in parallel together to fetch the data all at once, so we get rid of those request chains. But I like my components defining their data dependencies. I do too. It's close.
See some comments about how this is basically just their homepage. Sure. Double dip on content. If you're going to put all the effort in, reuse it. It's great. I'm all for that.
That's enough. Leave me alone. Go look at wherever you initiate fetch for an initial render. Not like a hover or like a popover, but like I just rendered a page and the user hasn't done anything. 99% of the time, that's coupled to a segment of the URL. And so it is component fetching, because that's pretty much the only place you fetch in components. So close enough. This is what it looked like before with React Query.
I'm covering up code. It's probably the easiest way to not. Yeah.
This is what your component.
Back to the before quick.
Go look at wherever you initiate fetch for an initial render. Not like a hover or like a popover, but like I just rendered a page and the user hasn't done anything. 99% of the time, that's coupled to a segment of the URL. And so it is component fetch.
Okay, here's the before again with the use param and the use query, invoice, async, let. Oh, wait. Tiny bit more verbose than I would have liked. It's fair, but like you could have await fetch dot then JSON this to one line it. This like async here could easily have been a one-liner. Both the error and loading states could have been one-liners, and that would have compressed this down from 24 lines to like 10, which wouldn't have looked like as bad. I think this is plenty readable, and this is not far from the exact code I would write, but this is the first time we've had like the very slight, like some amount of thought was put into making this look a little bit bigger. And that's fair because it makes it way more readable on a slide. But now I'm going to compare it to the after to see if there's any similar shortcuts or if it's like the same
React Query
config. Yeah, okay. The flat return versus not doing the flat return. I guess, yeah, because there's no conditions. That's what they're getting away with here, is there's no conditions. I know they weren't going for line count, they were going for complexity, and having the if brackets makes it clear that these are different like conditions with the tab difference, but like, yeah, that's fair. There's multiple paths here, which is...
Or with React Query. This is what your component looks like after in Remix, or sorry, in React Router. They're the same thing, by the way. Very soon, anyway, with the APIs we're going to be shipping soon here. Super nice. Now, we're not trying to get rid of React Query. React Query is cool. React Query actually has an API to initiate fetches outside of a hook. Like, you don't need a hook to say, hey, React Query, go get this thing on this cache key. So keep using React Query, keep using use SWR, anything that can initiate the fetch in this loader, and then you're going to swap out the use loader data in this slide on line 9 with use query. So you can still use all those other data libraries. We're just giving you a way to initiate all those fetches before we render. You don't have to use our little data cache where we hang on to this stuff. But for a lot of...
The ergonomics of using this with React Query are kind of phenomenal, now that I think about it. The type safety story is a bit rough, but beyond that, being able to use loader data to grab like the init value and then dump that in as like initial when you are defining a use query The ergonomics here sound incredibly promising. Oh, oh no. Maple, I'm going to regret what I'm about to say. How hard would it be to modify React Query and TRPC such that we could create a custom TRPC dot use a init prop or use a init query or something like that that attaches that data to the loader? We probably have to attach the data to the loader somewhere else, but a good path to, with one hook, as long as we have preloaded the data in the route, have that data be grabbed off of the route data if it already exists and the query skipped, or query otherwise. Like a use query or loader data that is using TRPC to honor a contract from whichever place it comes from. This feels very doable, but it also feels more like a new framework. I'm going to have to keep thinking on that one, but I'm beginning to see an opportunity here to do something really cool. Yeah. Back to this, because this is a really good talk and I'm distracting.
To initiate all those fetches before we render. You don't have to use our little data cache where we hang on to this stuff. But for a lot of cases, you can. This is the before and after for what the users see. You can see we've got a document request at the top, we got the chunks, and then each one of those fetches, and that's why our UI, whenever you see spinners, you can open up the network tab and see this is why it looks that way. After, we're able to flatten all of those requests into one thing, and you can see we actually get that first page in about half the time, like the full page rendered, just by parallelizing what we're doing. Less code, better UX. Anybody interested in that? Yeah. All right. I had a conversation yesterday where I said when there's a star at the bottom, that's when you're supposed to clap if nobody's clapping. But you can't see it. Data loading's not even the best part of what we're bringing over to React Router from Remix. It honestly is like, to us, it's almost like a side note. It's like, oh yeah, we can initiate fetches in parallel. It's cool.
Interesting.
Mutations is where it's at. I don't have enough time in this talk to talk about this. I'll be speaking at Render ATL in a few weeks. That's going to be that talk. I'm going to talk about mutations on the web in like a generic way, and then talk about how we're bringing it to React Router. But when I was a kid, I wrote a form. I put a PHP file through CyberDuck on my server, and the browser did everything else. It was amazing, and that's what we're bringing to Remix, or to React Router from Remix. But then you can still build great single-page app experiences.
I'll say it. We just had our first reach. That was a statement, and it didn't really bring much other than nostalgia and not a meaningful, here's how we're doing things differently. I'm very curious how a router introduces mutations. I'm a bit scared that this is where I'm going to go from really liking this talk to getting slightly frustrated. And again, I'm going to go back to this tweet because it was really good. I have a feeling we're about to contradict this. Okay, Ryan, that's good to hear. It's also a little confusing that I'm complaining about this Ryan when the other Ryan I really like's in chat. Hopefully it won't be too confusing for y'all.
Lydia talked about some of this stuff, so I don't need to bring up too many of them. Time to first byte, first contentful paint. Don't need to talk about all this. But I do have a weasel down here on time to interactive. That's a weasel because, like, if the spinner had an on-click, like, it's interactive, right? So that one's hard to pin down. We're just going to count time to interactive as everything's done. Side note, my left foot is going to get sunburned up here in 25 minutes. Didn't spray that. So here's what it looked like before and after with all those metrics in there. TTFB, first paint, largest paint, and time to interactive. Look at how far over, or what this does with React Router when we bring these APIs in. Our largest paint and our time to interactive become the same thing. There aren't all those intermediate states. And up top, you can see that we get rid of all of those, like just the jank and the bouncing around and stuff. And it's faster. The goal is always parallelize, unblock. That's the goal with WebPerf. Parallelize and unblock. Well, look at this. We've got some blocked stuff, right? I can't start downloading my data until all my JavaScript and the document have gotten to the browser. So I still have some blocking here. This is as good as React Router can do for you. That's it. It can't do any more. And this is where Remix comes in. Remix comes in, and it's a server. You need a server to be able to unblock these fetches. This is a loader in Remix. This is get server-side props.
I might have misheard. So to be clear, he doesn't talk about mutation at all during this. This is just data fetching. If so, this feels very carefully planned to be a talk I can like. Yes? Okay. Cool. Very scared of the mutation talk.
In next, this is on enter in React Router v3, and I'm really sorry that we got rid of that. It's coming back. This is really, React Router v6 is React Router v3. So the server knows the URL, so it can initiate fetches over there, and now they're going to be unblocked. So now our graph changes, right? Look at the top pictures up there, and watch the LCP move to the left significantly. And everything kind of becomes the same. FCP, LCP, time to interactive, mostly if you've got a progressively enhanced app. All the metrics become the same thing. But our time to first byte got slower because now we're waiting on the data, right?
I was about to pause to say this, like time to first byte is a nice thing to have really fast if you have an app-like experience. Owning the like empty state that has a nice like fancy background and a loading spinner that you own, it makes your app feel much faster. One of the reasons everybody says ping looks really fast is because we respond with HTML as quick as possible to get you something that looks good, and then everything comes in after. Technically, it takes longer to get to the right state, like the final interactive state, than it would using a parallelized Remix solution like this. But I get you a very good loading state instantaneously to make it feel more like an app as you hop around. Edge servers will always be slower than a cached HTML file in a CDN. Whenever I can put an HTML file in a CDN, that's what I want to start with as soon as possible. And if we stream from there, cool. But a cached file will always be the fastest solution if we can do that.
Right, we've still got some blocking there. We like to talk about levers at Remix. We just want an API that feels like a lever that we can like, helps us make a trade-off, right? Like there is a trade-off here. I can either have a fast time to first byte, but I'm going to sacrifice content layout shift or whatever, cumulative layout shift and my large.
This is where he goes into streaming.
Just paint. Well, if I want a better, less layout shift and a better LCP, then I can pull the gear this way, but I'm going to sacrifice time to first byte, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch. So yeah, TTFB is blocked by our data. So how do we get rid of that? We can introduce some sort of caching. Whoop. Just get rid of it. We just get it out of the request response lifecycle. This is SSG in all of its various forms. You're caching HTML documents. This is, I don't have my lanyard, Redis. I love that Redis is sponsoring this conference because in Remix we talk to front-end developers about like, yeah, just put a Redis cache in there. And they like wet their pants. What is Redis? If you're afraid of Redis.
Yeah, good call, Mayful. I hate when you put the word just in front of something like use Redis. Just build your own infrastructure, host it, and use that to run your own cache layer that has lots of like edge cases, race conditions, and update failure states that you now have to manage yourself. Just own it yourself. Just do it. Okay, we're at two admittedly minor faults so far. And for 17 minutes in to a talk I didn't expect to like, we're doing good overall. I just feel like specifically the statement, just use Redis is incredibly disingenuous. That's all. To be fair, I had this happen to me in the Remix server yesterday when I was talking about caching the growthbook JSON, and I was trying to put a cache header on the JSON response that I was getting from growthbook. So I'd fetch it and then re-return it on my own endpoint with a cache header. And when I was explaining my desire to do that, the response was, why don't you just put it in Redis instead? Because I don't want to spin up infrastructure to cache a piece of JSON. That's it.
Never mind. That's too spicy. I'm going to move on. All right, transitions. Everything you do for the first paint, like from the server, like we focus way too much in the web perf world about the first load. That's a big deal to e-commerce. Everyone else is like, I don't care. I've got the user here. They're going to turn in their assignment no matter what. Everything that you do to make the first load fast helps you make your transitions fast. So once you've already got the user, you don't have all that other junk. You just have these 3 things we need to fetch. So without React Router's new, or if you don't, you can do this without React Router. It's just a little more work. If you don't decouple those things, this is what it looks like. You click, you get all the intermediate states, and you get the waterfall chain. With the new React Router APIs, you click, everything loads at once in parallel, and you get rid of all those intermediate states. With Remix, we're actually your compiler. So we know all of your assets. We know how you fetch data because it's a convention-based system. So we actually have this, this prop on our links in Remix where you can say prefetch equals intent. And if you focus or hover a link, and we're working on some stuff for mobile on what intent means, we can actually just prefetch all that stuff with HTML link tags, link rel prefetch. And so when the user clicks it, you get like an extra 500 milliseconds to start loading all that stuff. And users don't operate in 100 milliseconds, right? They're not like click, 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 click. They kind of like move and they hover for a minute. They'll hover for like 2 seconds, right? Especially if it's e-commerce and you're like doing that gross pop-out thing that then covers the price and you're like, ah, crap, how do I figure, how much does it cost? They operate in seconds, not milliseconds. So you usually have enough time to get everything with a prefetch. It's super cool.
Tangent time. One of the cooler parts of my Remix exploration. I wanted to do link prefetching when I was playing with Remix because prefetching is cool. It's something I was doing in Next, something I wanted to do here. And when I looked for it and I searched prefetch, the things that came up were a bit confusing initially. Like it didn't search well because there's prefetch page links, which I thought might be what I'm looking for. It wasn't. Then I found here in the link component, this. This is so fucking cool. This is really cool. I like this pattern a lot. That's all. I was surprised when I found this. I was like, oh, it makes a lot of sense that at the link level, I determine if I want the sub stuff to come through.
And that's possible for the same reasons that everything else we've been talking about is possible. Parallelizing and unblocking and having a server. You add a compiler in the mix and you can do really cool stuff. Another cool thing with how React Router does its data fetching is it knows with these nested routes which part of the page is changing, which box should go into a pending state, and it knows not to fetch the stuff outside of it. So if I'm just changing between invoices here, when to fetch? Well, sometimes don't fetch. And React Router will do that automatically for you, and Remix already does that for you. I got one more thing to talk about. I got 5 minutes. I better go kind of quick because I got a little demo too. There are, did anyone count the React logos there? There's 18 of them. What does that look like? I know, but what is it? It's blue, it's meandering. A stream. Ooh, okay. We got a stream going on here. I think everyone is still pretty confused about what streaming means in React. Like we're hearing about it for years. I see it a lot on Twitter. I see people asking us about it a lot too. My goal with this talk is simply to help everyone understand what is so dang cool about streaming. I think Remix and React Router are going to be the best way to take advantage of it. But that's beside the point. The point is, what the heck is it and why is it exciting? We still have some blocking here, right? If we could somehow parallelize that stuff, this is what streaming is all about. This is the whole point So the request comes into the server, and the server says, all right, I'm going to initiate my fetches, but then I'm going to send a tiny chunk of the document, just a little one. Here you go. Boink. We got all our links in there. We got our script tags and a spinner. And now the browser can start downloading JavaScript, CSS, fonts, everything else that's going to block the next render when we have everything done. So look at how that brings all that stuff to the left. And in this section right here, everything is happening in parallel. The server is fetching, the browser is downloading assets, and everything is happening all at once. That's what makes streaming super cool.
Saw Ryan link the tweet. So, the tweet from Ryan: the more I experiment with HTTP streaming, the initial document, the more it seems it's only useful in the following cases. The user has a fast network connection and the server is slow at preparing a response. Better to invest in making your server fast. Interesting. I wonder if that's where this is about to go. Cool. Now I'm curious where he's going to go with streaming now.
Because CSS blocks the render, right? So you could literally have everything. Have data, have HTML, have CSS, and it still won't render because you need that CSS. So this gets your CSS going earlier. Even when you have a cache on the back end, you can stop doing the cache, and depending on the size of your bars, you might still have the same perceived performance just because you parallelize all of it. It's really cool. So we've got this gear where we can say, I can either have less content layout shift. I had to introduce a spinner. If you're going to do this, the spinner has to show up. But I can also pull the gear this way and improve every single one of those metrics on the right, if I'm okay with a spinner. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I am. I want a really good lever. I don't want to have to go find some other hook in my component to add my code to, or to change where I'm fetching or how I fetch or anything like that. I want a lever that I can just move left and right to make this trade-off. What if that lever was literally a weight? That would be sweet. I don't know. Maybe someone will figure it out. Oh, wait. We figured it out. Cue the demo. Ryan's on stage. Cue the demo. Oh, here we go. Cool. I got a minute 45. I
want to play this moment back because that was such a banger. I wish I could like call a banger alert on my own thing.
A weight. That would be sweet. I don't know. Maybe someone will figure it out. Here's an app. I'm not plugged in the internet. I'm doing a dashboard app. Got fast 3G here, and I'm gonna start with about blank, so that we can really see what's going on here. And hit enter. You can see my favicon is spinning, right? And boom, I got some gist, not really. I got some Pokemon, not really. I've got some cat facts, not really. Hey, that looks like my slide. The document took a long time, and then we could get all the resources, right? So over on the Remix side of things, here's my loader. I'm saying, let's get the gists, let's get the Pokemon, let's get the cat facts. And then here is our API for streaming and Remix. Deferred.
Pokemon and cat facts have been my go-to examples for data things for like a decade now. Like I use those in interviews and shit. Gists, no, but I'm very amused.
Normally you return a new response or a JSON here. But instead of JSON, you say deferred. And you can still send cache headers and any other headers, cookies, stuff like that over here. That's just like our normal JSON function. But you say deferred, and that puts Remix into streaming mode. That's it. That's the whole thing. So right now I'm saying, I want to await everything. Now I want to await nothing. I'm going to do a production build so my JavaScript isn't 12 megabytes. Oh. I don't know how to write JavaScript.
Who does?
There we go. Okay. I'm going to leave that one open. Let's get the network tab first. Go over here. Boom. Get rid of stuff. See that little bit of green? That's the request going out. Oh, I think I'm still waiting something up higher. Anyway, the request goes out. Oh, never mind. Yeah, this is coming out really quickly. And then when it turns from green to blue, that means that we sent the first chunk, and then blue is all the chunks afterward. And let's look at these two waterfall graphs and just see how different they look. Let me reload it. Watch the pending states. See how they drop into loading, and then that one took a little while longer? So over here, boink, boink, boink. So we don't wait for any data on the server. We just send the document, and then look at this right here. If I wasn't on HTTP 1.1 locally, you can see that every single one of these bars is going in parallel at the same time. And it makes it way faster. Load in DOM content in 3 seconds. And over here, where we waited for everything, it was in 4.8. Because this one, everything's not happening in parallel. So I was talking about levers. What if the Pokemon were important, but nothing else was? That's it. You say await on the Pokemon, and now the document is going to wait until the Pokemon are there. Notice that the Pokemon didn't go into a pending state. Watch, here it comes. Pokemon is immediately rendered with the server render, but then I let the other ones fall back, and the lever is just the await keyword. Super cool. Thank you all for coming, and we'll talk to you later.
Interesting. Is this code example public? What I want to see is a little deeper. What's he doing with these? I have a lot of concerns about the ergonomics of interacting with these pseudo promises. Oh boy. Let's see this example. Probably shouldn't be scared, but I am. Ryan's a phenomenal speaker. Like, now that talk's over, that was one of the best React talks I've seen, period. That was great. That was really good, genuinely.